when COVID hit, our business went down by 85%. So a store that had 20 employees was down to 3, a cashier, a server, and a dishwasher. So I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? So we had all this food that was going to be thrown away. So I said, oh, I got friends that work in the hospitals. Let me go out and deliver some. So I made 4 deliveries to local hospitals in Long Beach. And after the 4th one, 2 things happened. My brother goes, this is very good of you. We have 0 money in the account, so stop, right? And all my friends that were in the nonprofit world goes, what are you doing? Going to a hospital? Where's the last place you want to go near? And along the way, I've been able to help all these organizations because they were always busy taking care of the donors, not the volunteers. Well, we took care of the volunteers. So we changed the dynamics of this whole world on how people view nonprofits.
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new edition of the None of Your Business podcast. And today we have the incredible Wing Lam with us. Depending on where you live, you may or may not have delighted in Wahoos Tacos, but Wing is the mastermind behind the incredible business. But I will tell you, one of the things that I've come to know about Wing is, yes, you need to be successful in your business in the food industry, cutthroat industry that's very difficult to master and remain and stay profitable. But even bigger is the philanthropic, collaborative side of Wahoos Tacos. So I'm excited to dive into that. Wing, thank you for being with us.
Always fun to be here. Come on, SoFi Stadium on a non-game day. It's great.
It's always great. I always like to start with, tell us a little bit about the journey, because especially in food, when I see a Wahoos Tacos and there's people there and I'm like, gosh, you know, Wing and his crew, they're just so lucky. They're fortunate. They have clients and I don't. And I wish I could be like him. And, you know, tell us about the journey, because it's not always as glamorous as it looks when I drive by the shops.
Well, first off, right, you always hear people telling me, oh my God, I want you to open a restaurant near me, right? Why don't you have one here? And I always tell them, because people love eating the food, but somebody's got to make it. So the making part is what we're talking about. It's not as easy as it looks. And making it is even not as hard, again, easy as owning one, right? Because I've always been in the restaurant my whole life. My parents have had restaurants all over the world, so I've always worked in it. But I had no idea that there's this thing called taxes, payroll, insurance, workman's comp, all the business side of any of our businesses, right? So, I mean, again, talking about a dentist, right? Most guys that open their practices, whatever that may be, an attorney, a CPA, a dentist, a doctor, they don't succeed because they don't know how to run it as a business. They're great practitioners of the trade, but they don't know how to run the business. So for us, it was not only coming up with the recipes, but making sure you follow the recipes. Because you can do it once, it's easy. Do it again every single time in exactly the same thing. So there's no longer more ad-libbing your recipe. It's 2 ounces, 3 ounces, it's a scoop, it's a cup. So everything has to be precise. And I never, in my whole life, cooked by recipes. I always just did it by, hey, a pinch of that, a scoop of this, right? So I made sure that the first thing I did is write all the recipes down, so the next day I could do it again. So that was the first part. The second part was, again, worried about how do I get people in the doors, yes, right? So I luckily, I mean, going back to 1988, figured out if they weren't coming in, I got to literally give them a reason to come in. So I started going to do events, which I didn't know became event marketing, whatever, where I could sample the food at events, like surfing events, skateboarding events, where kids would try the food. And I'm like, wow, this is actually good. Especially when they didn't have to pay for it because it was part of the event. So, of course, when you don't pay for it, it's always great, right? Somebody else is paying for it. So that became part of like, hey, maybe the next time I go skateboarding, maybe I should go to Wahoos. So it became this part of the cycle. Like before you go to a gym, you usually get some kind of an energy bar or something, right? So it just became part of the routine before you surf, skate, and snowboard. Or afterwards, that the food was part of the complement.
Was Wahoos your first restaurant concept?
Yes, so it's the beginning. My parents had Chinese restaurants around the world. And the problem is growing up in Southern California, right, being the only Chinese family in the 70s in Newport Beach, I'm like, I already got that, check. We got a Chinese restaurant. I don't know, open another one, right? So I thought, what would be kind of a fun thing? And all the surfers, the rite of passage in the 70s and 80s, the first road trip you took was south of the border. So you go down surfing in Mexico, and what was the one thing that everybody had? Fish tacos. And every single kid goes, oh my God, how come nobody does it in California? Well, that's because nobody wanted to cook it. Everybody wanted to eat it, but nobody wanted to cook it.
So where was the first Wahoos?
We opened the first one in Costa Mesa, where luckily for us, if you know anything about the action sports industry, it was where Quicksilver had their U.S. headquarters, Billabong, and a bunch of other companies right there in Costa Mesa.
You open up, bang, line right out the door on day one.
No, it was like, hey, they started trickling in, and we're like, okay, we're not going to make payroll on Friday at this pace.
Yeah, tell us about that.
So we were like struggling, right? I mean, literally it was like, I think 30 customers came in the first day. And, it was like the next day, maybe 35. And I'm like, at this pace, we're never going to make payroll on Friday. So luckily my parents said, hey, we got you covered until you got to get your feet wet. So it took about 2 months to kind of like, I call it settle in, but it wasn't anything yet. But that's, again, we call partnerships, right? First thing we ever did, Billabong came in one day, and my buddy Mike Lesher said, hey, you're still standing. I'm like, well, thank you, we're still standing, right? Because we thought you would have been closed by now, right? And he said, hey, have you guys ever done, a catering? And what's the answer? Of course, we do it all the time. We've only been open 2 months. So we did a pre-trade show buyers preview party in their parking lot. And word got out to the entire industry that everybody goes, oh my God, there's this great restaurant in Costa Mesa. And everybody goes, what are you talking about? Goes, well, we went to Billabong before the trade show, and they were there set up in the parking lot. We set up little pop-up, grill and making tacos like a streetcar. And all the other companies said, Wing, I didn't know you did that. I goes, oh, we do it all the time. And all of a sudden, hey, we got a video premiere. Okay, we'll do that for Quicksilver. And all of a sudden, there's a contest on the beach. So word got out really quickly, and all of a sudden, everybody started coming in. And that's kind of like I said, you got to get the first one. Once the ball got rolling, we got from a little 10 by 10 on the beach to what we know today as the U.S. Open of surfing, right? So, but again, everybody goes, oh my God, the U.S. Open is huge. It goes, if you would have seen this 38 years ago, it was one 10 by 10 on the beach and a bunch of kids.
Talk to us about the fear then. Did doubt ever creep in? Fear when you were looking at maybe not making payroll? And even, yeah, we do it all the time. Did you ever think like, well, but what if we can't? Did doubt and fear ever creep in?
It always does, because the fear of failure, right?
Yeah.
But what's the opposite? You got to go back to corporate, right? So it was more fearful to go back to corporate than to stick it out and figure it out how to make it work. So at the end of the day, it's like, hey, you can always quit, but what are you going to do when you quit? You got to go get another job. It's not like you quit and you're done. You know what I mean? So it was like, okay, if I quit, I'm going to have to go work for somebody else. So
I want to get to collaboration, but before I do that too, very interesting, because I want to talk about the other side of that.
Yeah.
So you start to find success.
Yeah.
All entrepreneurs like, oh, if you're successful, now you scale.
Yeah.
Scaling is not as easy as, oh, now you just open 2, 3. Like, talk to us about the challenges of what happens when I attempt to scale.
So what happens is it's hard to replicate ourselves.
Yes.
So you have 2 parts of it. One, you want somebody, you train them as much as you can possibly train them. But the problem is they're not you, right? So you have your own mind. So you're like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. Well, what if I could do it this way?
Right.
Well, then you and I should have those conversations, because here's the system, here's the formula. If you're going to alter it, why? And if you can't give me a good reason, don't screw with it. But if you say, hey, what if we did this instead? I'm like, okay, I'll try it this way first. And if it doesn't work, we'll go back to my way, right? So I got to give you a little bit of leeway. But the biggest thing is, we call it micromanaging, right? I don't hire or partner with somebody and micromanage them. You got to give them a little bit of leeway, show them the game plan, the formulas, the recipes, everything that works. And if they have ideas, add to it. So our things today are pretty close to how we started, but there's new menu items, there's new things. but the original stuff is still the same. But we've added new salsas, we've added more things, right? So give everybody a little bit of creativity, because that means they have ownership in the idea, so they feel part of the innovation. Because if you stifle them, you're just going to get somebody that's miserable. Eventually they're going to go, you know what? I got a better idea. I'm going to do my own thing anyway. But if you give them a little bit of leeway, allow them a little creativity, they'll be part of like, okay, I like what you're doing, but here's something else we can do. So, right, and that's how you can scale it, because early on, I was happy if they did about 80% of what I did.
Yeah.
And it's really, really hard to let go, right? Because you're like, oh my God, they're not 100%. Well, trust me, nobody's going to be 100% of you, because there's only one of us.
You know, I always say that whenever it comes to scaling, people always say that to me. So the reason why I don't scale is because nobody will ever do it as good as me.
No one.
But I'm like, to your point, but what if you had somebody that did it at 80%?
Yep.
What if we had two people that could both do it at 80%? Now I actually have 160% of you.
Exactly.
We're now actually more productive, more efficient, generating more revenue,
Yes.
and they don't even they're not 100% of you. They're not as good as you, but you show up every day, you work at 100%.
Yep.
Well, if I could just get 4 people at 80%, I've got 320% of win.
Yes.
That's how I could win in this concept of scale. So not everybody has to always be there. I want to dive into collaboration, but one thing I've noticed, and this is an interesting thing because we're many years removed from COVID. It's like this thing. So this thing. But COVID doesn't have to be COVID. It could be any period of time. People go through difficulty. There's death, there's divorce, there's issues in your business, clients, there's competitors that do nasty things to you. That could be your COVID. Somehow we've put COVID in a box and we're like, okay, so now there's this COVID thing and now we all identify it, but it doesn't have to be just COVID. No. It's times of difficulty, it's adversarial times. You navigated, because COVID was very detrimental in the restaurant industry. I mean, just crushing. And you became very innovative, but you also became very community-minded and collaborative. Talk to us about the thought process. What did you do? How did you get through it? And how did it work out?
So pre-COVID, I spent literally about half of my day planning charity events. I've sat on almost every board, every nonprofit. I mean, just crazy stuff, because nonprofits have a great idea on how to solve something, make somebody's life better, but they don't take a business approach to it. They just like, hey, we need money to cure cancer. Well, great. How are you going to get it, right? So the whole idea is we need it, but how are you going to get there? So I come in and I look at their books, I look at everything that they do, and I'm like, wow, you're spending money here, there, you're doing this, you're doing that, because you're not very efficient as a business, not as a nonprofit, but as a business. So I come in and start looking at it, because I'm a bean counter, I'm a finance guy. So I start looking at it, goes, this is how you can raise more money, get more awareness, all the things that you need to get to the next level. So when COVID hit, half of my day was done. I'm like, okay, there's nothing to do, right? And at the same time, we lost between Wednesday and Friday when they made the announcement. They said all non-essential business to close. At the bottom, they said, okay, restaurant, you can stay open. By the time they got to the bottom, nobody read that. They just saw supermarkets, gas stations, and whatever, right? So we were in that, oh, we're not going to go out to eat anymore because restaurants are closed. So our business went down by 85%. So a store that had 20 employees was down to 3, a cashier, a server, and a dishwasher, right? Pretty much. And then it was the guy cooking and running around, right? So I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? So we had all this food that was going to be thrown away. So I said, oh, I got friends that work in the hospitals. Let me go out and deliver some. So I made 4 deliveries to local hospitals in Long Beach. And after the 4th one, 2 things happened. My brother goes, this is very good of you. We have 0 money in the account, so stop, right? And all my friends that were in the nonprofit world goes, what are you doing? Going to a hospital? Where's the last place you want to go near? And I'm like, well, this is what I got to do. And all of a sudden, I'm like, there's nothing going on. I goes, what are you guys doing with your money? And they're like, nothing. Can I have some of it back so that I can go make food for the nurses and the doctors? And they all looked at me and go, yeah, why not? I goes, and by the way, I don't just want your money. I want you guys to join me. And they're like, are you crazy? I go, no, what are you doing? You got nothing, everybody's at home. So very reluctantly, they all said, okay. So Monster Energy Drink, Cliff Bar, Hint Water, and Yogurtland. And then all my friends with money, we started going out together. And then KLOS calls and goes, hey, I saw that you're doing this. What do you need? I goes, well, we could use some money and we can use some notoriety. So let people know we're doing this. So they came up with, Wendy from KLOS said, why don't we start a new organization called the California Love Drop? And we start talking about it on the radio. People would start a GoFundMe on KLOS for us. So every Friday we would give an update because there's nothing going on, right? And we say, hey, we've been to St. Joseph's, we've been to UCI Medical, whatever hospital, and it became a weekly show, which is still going on 5 years later, right? And we got hundreds of thousands of dollars to cover our hard costs, the food costs, right? And that's how we survived. And along the way, I've been able to help all these organizations because they were always busy taking care of the donors, not the volunteers. Well, we took care of the volunteers. So we changed the dynamics of this whole world on how people view nonprofits. Because I'm like, hey, even the volunteers need to be taken care of. Somebody needs to thank them for what they're doing. So food drives, you name it, that's what we did, you know.
And that's amazing, turning what looks like a giant problem into an opportunity.
Yep.
But we mentioned earlier today, it wasn't self-serving.
No.
It was not an opportunity like, how am I going to save myself?
Yeah.
It was, how am I going to contribute? How am I going to help? The flip side of that, though, when you tell the story, Monster, Clip
Yeah.
Bar, all these people that get involved, were there not some people that were like, Wing, I want to get involved because I want you to save my business? One of the things that's very difficult when we talk to collaborative people is then we go back out into our communities with our colleagues and sometimes we run into, there's givers and takers. You're obviously a giver. But sometimes we run into a taker and they're just there to see what's in it for them. Have you ever encountered that and how do we deal with that?
Well, luckily, you know, there's this thing called referrals. Nobody gets into our network if somebody doesn't refer them in, right? Because at the end of the day, you know, over the years, we've always met people that said, oh, I'm going to do this for you. And you're going, great. And when you call them, they're like, what are you talking about, right? They have, you know,
selective memory.
So very selective. So they're very easy to take whatever they want from you, but they're very hard to get it from them. So once we know who those guys are, we just put them on the side. There's a little short list of those people, right, that we say, hey, just remind ourselves. And if any of our friends, or if we see them doing anything in the community, we immediately call our friends, because by the way, keep an eye out for that guy. And he goes, what do you mean? He goes, whatever you're going to do, get it first from them. Then do whatever you want for them later, but not the other way around. Because I'm telling you, they can't remember what they told you. And it's hilarious because you might have an email. You might have a text message, and they still will deny it. And I'm like, and there's no legal document that's going to hold them to it. They're not going to do it anyway. So try to avoid those guys and surround yourself with guys that all you got to do is pick up the phone. They're going to go, what do you need, Wing? Oh yeah, I'll be right there. So be, you know, honest with yourself. Are you one of those guys that you're going to do what you say you're going to do? Or are you just going to tell people, yeah, I'll call you later, with no intention of calling them? I don't want to be that guy. I want to be the guy who says, if I call you later, I'm going to call you later, you know?
How do you organize that then? You have so many contacts, so many collaborative partners. You want to show up for them. You said that's what I want to do. But sometimes, like, just life happens. How do you have a system or a way that you're keeping track of who you are in service to? Yeah,
and like I said, like today we have 3 events going on, right? So the reason Brian isn't here, he's having a much more fun event at K-Rock with Slightly Stupid, right? And I'll be going back later to do a taco night, right? And then I have another group going to LA to one of the parks to do another event. So luckily we have teams, right? I would love to be at all 3, but all 3 are happening at the exact same time. So sometimes you got to go, okay, where am I going to make the biggest impact? And where can the other team do the job? Even though it would be better if I was there, but they'll have more fun without me anyway, so it's fine.
Well, listen, I super appreciate you dropping in and sharing your wisdom. as always, I want to encourage everybody, if you have a Wahoos Taco near you, go and check them out. You're in for a real treat. It's absolutely delicious. You guys have done such amazing things. And more importantly than the food, because everybody loves to eat the food, everybody loves to be served.
Yep.
And so the impact that you guys have made through the food is even greater than the temporary taste that we enjoy while we're consuming those fish tacos. Thank you so much, Wing, for being
Thanks
with
for
us.
having me.